Chapter 39, Wheeling and Dealing. For our new budget for 2013, I had to go back to the creativity barrel again. We came up with 4 new ideas to raise income to get us through the year. 1, lease advertising space on the back side of the building facing the freeway for $500 per month. This would be a giant 8x18 banner with an ad and a caption saying something like, "Thank you to such and such company for helping us care for Spokane's homeless." 2, fix up 2 of our many vacant rooms in the upstairs area to rent at $300 each as furnished transitional housing for Union Gospel Mission graduates who are at the stage of preparedness to leave the mission and start a new life. There were agencies who could assist with subsidizing that rent. We also had connections solving legal occupancy issues on that one. 3, we started the $2 Club. 50 people who committed to donating at least $2 per week every week in the offering plate. This includes our homeless congregational attendees who want to see our church and meals continue. That would add $5,000 to the total income for the year. Number 4, we added the $40 Club. We plan to recruit 50 people, mostly from outside our church, who would donate $40 per month for the year. We also needed 10 people in the current congregation who weren't giving at all to give at least $40 per month. Every church has people like that. If only 10 of the existing people could find 4 friends who believe in our work in this neighborhood to agree to chip another $40 per month each, we would add another $24,000 to our year's income. Then we could finally make budget. If we could achieve these 4 goals, in addition to keeping what were our current tithing and leases, then for the first time in many, many years, we would not run a deficit. We could reconsider selling off our location. We would not have the threat of closing hanging over our heads anymore. We thought this was possibly within reach, but it would take someone being the champion of each of these strategies. Champions working on getting people to join one of the clubs, or spearheading fixing up the rooms for rent, or working on getting the sign space leased. We asked people to use their friendship networks and Facebook to recruit others to come and check out our church. Many of us had people who supported our work from far and wide. And if we all just asked, then it's entirely possible that we could find our work here supported by hundreds of people who simply believe in a downtown urban mission field. Crazier stuff has happened. Keep in mind, this was all funding just to keep the church going with a stripped-down operational budget. All of the money and financial resources, which were used to run our Streetwise ministry meals to the community, were raised totally outside of the church budget. This meant that we were raising upwards of $30,000 more just to make the meals happen. I had become a decent grant writer and used my connections at the Homeless Coalition to learn all about that process and get training wherever I could. I wrote grants to the Health and Human Services Department of the city and received $10,000 a year for 2 years in a row, along with an additional $20,000 grant to remodel our kitchen. I have no idea how we really did it. God supplied the bulk of the giving through my extended family and out-of-state friendships who believed in us and in our work. Some of the volunteers who came and worked in our kitchen became regular givers to the Streetwise ministry, but the church was never able to give to it, other than supply the space and the equipment, which was nice. The church was never affluent enough to give anything to help cover those meal costs. In fact, when the poor started coming to church in the mornings and eating all the cookies and drinking all the coffee and pocketing all the sugar packets, we had Streetwise fund the entire church budget for those supplies, too. When the church still struggled, we had Streetwise pay $300 to $500 per month to the church for the offset of utility costs. My wife ran Streetwise meals and had to raise her own part-time salary. Almost all of the Streetwise income came through Tanya's and my personal relationships. A few more names made the list through my business connections or my grant writing. Several other names also made the list because they were getting our monthly newsletter articles or had read a recent newspaper or local magazine interview. We just weren't stupendously good at expanding that base. The track record of people in the church helping raise additional funds was a pretty poor one. We kept donor records of approximately 100 donors of the list. Usually all but 4 to 5 of these were friends and family of Tanya and mine. I must admit, I was a touch suspicious that church members would help raise cash even as we were getting ready to present our budget ideas. But we had to try. Imagine After all the extra effort of fundraising and income strategies, sitting down and still needing to raise much more to keep the church afloat. It was exhausting. I must say that it was only Jesus doing it because it kind of defies logic and intelligence, doesn't it? I mean, how did a little broke church with barely any people and not a very good pastor who had no staff pull off this ministry? How do we keep a church going with no resources? I don't know. But at the beginning of 2013, I thought the basic 4 ideas to get solvent were pretty good. I announced to the board members that I would not be championing any of them. I felt I had done enough fundraising and thought it was time that someone else needed to take on those projects. I was probably more than a touch across the line on burnout road. For a while, we saw at least $100 per week come in spare change through the offering via the $2 club. The homeless stepped up. Some outsiders began to send us $40 per month as part of that club, but in truth, we didn't get the church champions we needed for any of the 4 ideas. Someone needed to monitor the giving clubs and report progress. Someone needed to be able to say, we only have 20 people giving in the $40 club, and I have an idea to get another 30 people on board. But no one ever looked at the data or kept track, and no one ever tried to write a letter campaign or do anything to get those clubs to happen. The homeless did pretty well for a while in their $2 per week giving, but a champion needed to find ways to encourage and thank them and get more of them to join in, and no such champion arose. We didn't get the 2 rooms ready to house the homeless, which churches can do legally under the National Emergency Shelter Laws, because another church came along and offered to rent us for a Sunday night service on the condition that no one be on site or housed in the facility. We thought that would offset the income and might end up being better for us in the long run, so we inked that deal instead of developing the room rental idea. As we began 2013, we had a plan that had potential to work, but would take a lot more effort from more people if the venture was going to truly succeed. I wouldn't know until that summer, but the plans would be unsuccessful. In the end, the ideas were good, but proved failures in execution. We just kept sinking. I cannot tell you how extremely stressful and frustrating it is to have to do 3 times as much as any ministry I'd ever worked in, only to produce 1/4 of the result. The constant stress and failure and the discouragement will wear a person out. I decided that I wasn't a very good pastor at all. I couldn't really figure out how other guys did it. They always made it sound so simple at all of the conferences I attended. It was pretty obvious by now that I simply didn't have what it takes, whatever that is. I began telling Jesus in my prayer life that my path was one big mistake and I was way off track, and I began to ask him what I was supposed to do to get out. Whatever I was supposed to be, this wasn't it. You can't keep failing and not realize one day something is terribly wrong, so it must be you. I started taking medication for high blood pressure that year.